Johnny Carson left behind a fortune so vast it still brings his family to tears. For 30 years, he was the last face millions of Americans saw before drifting off the unchallenged king of late night. With flawless timing, a plain-spoken Midwestern ease, and that signature golf swing, Johnny didn't merely host The Tonight Show, he defined it. When he signed off on May 22, 1992, an era truly ended. After 4,531 episodes and nearly 25,000 guests, television's most influential figure stepped away at the peak of his power, choosing a famously private life that only deepened his legend. For the next 13 years, until his death in 2005, Carson was almost invisible, a sphinx in retirement whose silence amplified his mystique. But what became of the immense wealth built over those decades on top? The man who once joked, "I was so naive as a kid I used to sneak behind the barn and do nothing," was anything but naive. With money. When Johnny Carson died at 79, he left a financial legacy that stunned Hollywood and permanently altered the lives closest to him. This isn't merely a tale of dollars, though the figures will stagger you. It's a portrait of a complicated man whose final choices revealed more about his character than anything said on air. Today, we follow the surprising path of Johnny Carson's fortune, how he earned it, where it went, and why it stirred such deep emotions in his family. Because sometimes what we leave behind says more than what we do while we're here. And in Carson's case, his ultimate legacy wasn't the empire he built on television, but what he decided to do with its rewards after the cameras went dark for good. The boy from Nebraska, humble beginnings. Long before the years Johnny became America's nightly greeting, John William Carson was a Midwesterner with dreams larger than his means. Born on October 23, 1,925 inches, Corning, Iowa, and raised mostly in Norfolk, Nebraska, his childhood didn't advertise the astonishing future ahead. Johnny grew up in the heart of the Depression, recalled a friend of the family. His father, Homer, worked for the power company, steady employment in tough times, but the Carsons weren't wealthy. His mother, Ruth, was the standout personality at home, strong-willed and sharp. Johnny inherited her wit, though he was far more reserved. That complicated mother-son dynamic later surfaced in Johnny's self-deprecating on-air jokes. "My mother never quite believed I was good enough." He'd quip a line with more truth than punchline. What truly set young Johnny apart was an obsession with magic. After seeing Harry Blackstone, Sr., he ordered a magic kit at 12 and was hooked. It wasn't just sleight of hand, it trained his sense of timing, misdirection, and how to read an audience. The great Carsoni soon played Rotary clubs and fairs for $3 a show, his first entertainment income. That teen magician could hardly imagine that decades later his annual pay would reach 8 figures. After high school came the U.S. Navy, where he served as an ensign during World War II. He never saw combat, but decoding messages aboard the USS Pennsylvania broadened his world and supplied future comedic anecdotes. Post-discharge, he enrolled at the University of Nebraska to study radio and speech, aiming for the booming post-war broadcast field. On campus station KFAB, he took early steps toward performance. He wasn't the obvious star, remembered a classmate. Smart, quietly ambitious, even shy off stage. Nothing like the self-assured host America would later see. The transformation would be remarkable. Carson's early career took him to WOW Radio in Omaha, and then WOW TV, hosting the Squirrel's Nest humble beginnings for a future king. Even those gigs showed his cool under pressure and knack for finding humor in chaos. In 1951, he made the pivotal jump to Los Angeles. At KNXT, he developed Carson's cellar, catching the eye of heavy hitters like Red Skelton. When Skelton reportedly knocked himself out an hour before a live broadcast, Carson was thrown on stage as a last-minute replacement and delivered, proving he could think fast before a national audience. He also hosted Earn Your Vacation and The Johnny Carson Show, short-lived but crucial stepping stones. By 1957, Carson was fronting Who Do You Trust?, the job that sharpened his interview instincts and paired him with Ed McMahon, the sidekick who'd introduce him for 3 decades on The Tonight Show. Johnny was methodical, said a television historian. He studied what worked, built a toolkit, and learned to seem effortless. All of that groundwork paid off in March 1962, when NBC made the decision that changed TV history, choosing Carson to succeed Jack Paar as Tonight Show host. At 36, Johnny stepped into the role that would help make him one of the richest entertainers of his time. The making of a fortune, more than a host. Johnny Carson didn't simply front The Tonight Show. He owned pieces of it. In an era when talent was usually just salaried, Carson reshaped the model through sharp negotiation and impeccable timing. Johnny understood his worth, said a former NBC exec. By the mid-1970 seconds, he wasn't only seeking raises, he wanted ownership stakes, licensing, and control. The numbers tell the story. In 1962, his salary was $100,000 a year, roughly $900,000 today. By retirement 30 years later, he was reportedly taking in $25 million annually then, the highest-paid TV entertainer. But his real financial genius was leverage. In 1980, Tonight expanded from 90 minutes to 2 hours. Carson agreed with a twist. NBC returned the extra 30 minutes to local affiliates. Why give up airtime? Because Carson Productions would produce many of the shows filling those slots, creating an additional income stream outside his NBC paycheck. It was brilliant, noted a historian. He created prime schedule real estate, then built on it. Less visible to viewers was the scope of his clout. By the late 1970 seconds, Carson had secured ownership of his Tonight Show library, an asset that grew even more valuable with home video and cable reruns. He also approved guest hosts as his vacations increased an unusual level of control, but a testament to his irreplaceable value. His contract renewals became legend, the ritual. Johnny hinted at leaving. NBC panicked. Carson emerged with better terms. In 1980, he landed an unprecedented package, trimming to 3 nights a week for 37 weeks a year, down from 5 nights for 46 weeks, while boosting compensation. That's roughly 111 shows a year versus 230, essentially doubling his per-show rate and freeing time for other ventures. History helped too. His peak years coincided with soaring ad rates before cable splintered audiences. Night after night, he was a singular asset to advertisers. The Carson economy rippled outward. One great set could make a comedian's career. Publishers printed extra copies for the Carson bump, and Vegas raised fees for comics who passed his silent test. Founded in 1980, Carson Productions expanded his empire beyond Tonight, co-producing hits like TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes with Dick Clark. While not a mega studio, it diversified revenue beyond his network salary. Quietly, he also bought prime Southern California real estate during a boom, including a Malibu compound reportedly purchased for about $5 million in the early 1980 seconds, with a tennis court, pavilion, and beach access. Properties in Beverly Hills and other elite zip codes rounded out the portfolio. He lived well, but compared to today's flash, he was almost modest. A friend said, "Nice homes, art, smart investments, no gaudy displays." By retirement, analysts put his net worth between 300 to 450 million in early 1990s dollars, roughly 600 to 900 million today. Conservative money management and seasoned advisors meant the fortune didn't shrink after his farewell. It kept growing, which led to the question insiders obsessed over. What happens to that vast wealth when television's most private superstar leaves the stage? The answer would be as unexpected as the man himself. The man behind the desk, a complex private life. To grasp Carson's final decisions, you have to grasp the contradictions. For 30 years he visited America's homes. Yet he stayed an enigma, warm and razor-sharp on camera, intensely private off it. He was like two people, said a longtime Tonight staffer. The genial, unflappable host was real, but only one facet. Offstage he could be withdrawn, difficult, even lonely. Fame isolated him in ways few around him could fully understand. His personal life was equally complicated. 4 marriages to Jody Wolcott, 1,949, 1,963, Joanne Copeland, 1,963, 1,972, Joanna Holland, 1,972, 1,985, and finally Alexis Maas, married in 1987 until his death in 2005. The first 3 unions were strained by workaholism, a reluctance with intimacy, and, some say, infidelity. His divorce from Joanne reportedly cost $6 million, a big number, in the early 1,970 seconds, yet only a slice of his expanding wealth. The 1,985 split from Joanna was the shocker. A reported $80 million in cash and property at the time, among California's largest divorce settlements. Roughly 30% of his estimated net worth. That was a wake-up call, said a financial advisor. From then on, asset protection and estate planning became paramount. With his sons, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, the bonds were loving, but often distant, strained by his workload and reserved nature. He wasn't the most demonstrative father, said a family acquaintance. He adored them, but showing it was hard. He kept few close friends, and if he felt betrayed, he could turn cold fast. His drinking, well known in industry circles, sometimes complicated things. Alcohol helped the naturally shy Johnny work a room, a producer explained, but there were stretches when it went too far. The deepest wound came in 1991, when Richard died in a car crash at 39. Friends say Carson was devastated, though he kept his grief private. That loss pushed him to reevaluate everything: retirement, meaning, and the kind of legacy he wanted to leave. The final act, a fortune dispersed. Johnny Carson died on January 23, 2005 of complications related to emphysema, and the TV world mourned. Quietly, lawyers and accountants began executing one of Hollywood's most carefully constructed estate plans. Johnny was extraordinarily deliberate, said an attorney familiar with the documents. This was a long-honed blueprint. The headline: the principal beneficiary wasn't family or industry pals, it was the Johnny Carson Foundation, previously a relatively low-profile charity that suddenly vaulted into the big leagues with an endowment reported at $156 million. For a star who avoided political and cultural skirmishes, this seemed surprising. In truth, it was perfectly in character. He believed in opening doors for strivers, the way he had to fight for his own. The foundation's focus mirrors that ethos. Education, children's services, and health initiatives, particularly in Nebraska, where he grew up, and Southern California, where he built his career. Its style is methodical and low-key, deliberately shunning publicity exactly the way Johnny preferred to operate. A signature gift came in 2015. $20 million to the University of Nebraska, creating the Johnny Carson Center for Emerging Media Arts, investing in the kind of creative training that launched him. As for his sons Christopher, Corey, and Richard, posthumously, they received inheritances, though amounts were never disclosed. Speculation ranges from comfortable to generous, but not extravagant. Johnny believed massive inheritances can harm kids, said a family source. He wanted them secure, not rudderless. His widow, Alexis, reportedly received specific bequests, properties, and meaningful personal items, while the bulk went to the foundation. Reflecting a mutual understanding of his philanthropic aims, he also remembered loyal staff, old friends, and longtime colleagues with private gifts. One surprise bequest: $800,000 to the Animal Foundation of Las Vegas, reflecting his affection for wildlife, a thread fans glimpsed during Tonight Show visits from animal experts over the years. When the full picture emerged, there were tears not of anger, but recognition. His loved ones finally saw the values that guided him, expressed in the most concrete way possible. The unexpected legacy tears of realization. In the years after his passing, the foundation quietly changed lives, scholarships, children's health, arts endowments, community programs. By 2022, grants had topped $200 million with little fanfare. For the family, watching that impact has been an emotional education. Those tears weren't about money lost, they were about pride and understanding. A scholarship to a student from Nebraska who reminds them of Johnny's grit. A young broadcaster whose opportunity echoes his own path. Moments like that define a different kind of inheritance. Occasionally, his sons have attended events and seen the ripple effects up close. When Chris meets a scholarship recipient with that same Midwestern resolve, a board member said, "On high, it can be overwhelming." Like Johnny is still discovering talent from beyond the curtain. Former Tonight Show colleagues have felt it too. Many say the philanthropy revealed depths they never fully appreciated. A moral clarity, an aversion to performative charity, a preference for genuine, measurable good. The professional persona versus the private man. Carson's legacy has forced a reassessment. The relaxed, ever-amused Tonight Show presence was real and a performance. Off-camera, he could be quiet to the point of vanishing. America's greatest conversationalist sometimes struggled with actual conversation, joked a friend. He compartmentalized with near-clinical precision. Brilliant and present at work, then abruptly unreachable in private. Even his giving followed that pattern, substantial, almost always anonymous. He believed character shows when no one is looking. His farewell broadcast in May 1992 offered rare glimpses behind the mask. Between segments, staff saw the emotion in his eyes as a colossal chapter closed. On air, he kept the poise and restraint he'd perfected. "I bid you a very heartfelt good night." But those who knew him understood the depth beneath that dignified line. In many ways, his estate plan is the truest expression of who he was, values revealed through action rather than applause. Beyond money, the true Carson fortune. Carson's rise from Nebraska modesty to extraordinary wealth is a classic American arc. But his decision to channel most of that fortune into opportunity for others tells an even bigger story. He understood that money's highest use isn't comfort or display, it's impact, said a philanthropy advisor. For his family, the surprise has evolved into gratitude. Yes, they received inheritances, but the greater gift is seeing lives remade by his choices. What stands out is the balance. Care for loved ones and a broad, purposeful vision, not either. Or, it's the difference between writing checks and building ladders. In a celebrity culture obsessed with spectacle, his model emphasizes substance over show. He could have sought credit, he declined it. Applause is addictive, he liked to say, but empty if you haven't earned it. The Foundation's quiet, efficient work is exactly the kind of earned impact he valued. For younger generations who know him only through clips, the philanthropy introduces the man behind the smile, the one who believed talent is universal, but opportunity isn't. Notably, the Foundation has stayed true to his approach. Efficient, unsentimental, results first. We ask not just what Johnny would do, but why, said a board member, applying his underlying values to new needs. And so, nearly 20 years after his passing, the Carson effect keeps spreading. By 2023, distributions exceeded $250 million, and his example is reshaping other celebrity estates, multiplying the impact. In decades to come, many successful people will know Johnny Carson not as late night's king, but as the person whose scholarship changed their life. That's a cultural transformation even he might not have predicted. For a man so hard to know beyond his carefully crafted persona, this final chapter may be the clearest portrait. Not the figure behind the desk, but the human being behind that figure. In a career defined by perfect timing, perhaps his most powerful moment came after the monologue ended, when he chose a legacy, measured not in ratings or even dollars, but in opportunity, created and lives lifted. And that's a fortune worth crying about.